All right, you have local shares extending their rally today, outperforming at that for the third straight day here. The PCCI making gains up close to 8% to 6,630.85. This amid reports, that officials are considering rolling out 1.1 million doses of vaccines at hand. For the first dose, this is, of course, allocated for healthcare workers, and just wait for another tranche of supplies for the second dose. Cases the past days have reached peaks seen in July last year. Daily cases have reached the 4,000 level rather the past 6 days. Well, this has prompted LGUs to implement granular lockdowns. Now, should stricter lockdowns be reimposed, Philstock's Claire Alviar says consumer essentials still stand to benefit from the pandemic. Hence, now would be a good opportunity to actually cash in or buy pure gold as the stock is undervalued. Investors heeding that call here. The stock leading today's winners, as you can see right here, pure gold is up close to 5.25%. That's after the supermarket operator has lost close to 3.1% in the last 3 days, all the way to Wednesday. Pure gold now priced at 36 pesos and 20 centavos a share. Quite a sight for sore eyes as well, looking at our leaders and laggards here, with all stocks in the top 10 ending the day higher by more than 2%. You have Alliance Global inching higher by 4.9%. Security Bank likewise also gaining 3.7%, as well as SM Prime. On the other hand, you have a number of stocks still in the red here. Aboitiz Power is down 1.8%. SM Investments also inching lower by 1.8%. Now, moving on to other stocks here, joining the rallies, AC Energy. That's after it copped 11.9 billion pesos from Aaron Investment subscription of 4 billion primary shares. That's going to boost funding for projects as well as potential acquisitions of Ayala's power unit. This serves as a first tranche of a GIC's investment to achieve a 17.5% stake in AC Energy. If you try to take a look at this chart right here, you'd see AC Energy has climbed by as much as 1.5%, at least for the day. It's now priced at 6 pesos and 98 centavos a share. And then from AC Energy, there's DMCI. The stock ending the day unchanged here. The contractor has commenced construction of its 10.5 billion peso Kamanava water reclamation facility. That's going to be, of course, for Maynilad. And it's going to have a capacity to treat 205 million liters per day. The facility is the biggest of its kind yet in the Philippines. It will cover 1.2 million households in Kamanava, and that's expected to boost Maynilad's capacity by 600%. While DMCI ended the day flat today at 5 pesos and 20 centavos. Its Maynilad partner, Metro Pacific, actually joining the rally today. It's up 1.8%, as you can see right here, represented by the orange line. It is up again 1.8% to 3 pesos and 93 centavos a share. Now from water, let's take things to the sky, this time with our airlines. We try to take a look at the movement here of both Cebu Pacific and Philippine Airlines. Philippine Airlines, being represented by the white line here, has experienced at least an 0.8% climb today. Cebu Pacific, on the other hand, also experiencing gains here. This is despite reports from the Air Carriers Association of the Philippines that combined losses of local airlines have already amounted to 65 billion pesos. This as the sector has only received an 800 million peso benefit from Bayanihan 2. That's a dismal amount compared to what has been granted to their global counterparts, at least according to ACAP. Now, 33% of the sector's workforce, or some 5,000 employees, have also been terminated. They're expecting global airline industry to recover by 2023 or 2024. Again, looking at the prices of Philippine Airlines and Cebu Pacific here, PAL is now at 6 pesos and 15 centavos a share, while Cebu Pacific is still priced at 45 pesos and 40 centavos a piece. All right, taking off from that report, what's the outlook like for the airline industry and the tourism sector in general, given new restrictions? To tell us about their plans, we have Tourism Undersecretary Benito Bengzon. Good afternoon, Usec Bengzon.
Good afternoon, Jes.
All right, you have ACAP telling the Senate, that they're left to actually fend for themselves, relying on private resources to survive and recover. Airlines, of course, we do know is more under the transportation department, but they're also a backbone of the tourism sector. Is the government looking at a rescue package for the industry?
Well, we support the efforts to help the aviation and airline industry because in the case of the Philippines, aviation plays a very vital role in bringing tourists into the country and moving them around. And we are well aware of the huge losses that our domestic carriers have incurred since the lockdown last year. And we're hoping that they will be given a bigger share in a stimulus package to be given by the government. From the information that we've obtained from the Air Carriers Association of the Philippines, the operating capacity is still at around 20% compared to pre-pandemic levels, and that is certainly very low when you compare it to the operating levels of our neighbors. So certainly there's a need to provide financial assistance, tourism industry will support any efforts to help our airline partners.
By financial assistance or at least stimulus package, Yusek Bengzon, do I take it to mean that at least for a proposed Bayanihan 3, there will be an allocated fund for the airline industry?
Well, we are hoping that under another round of Bayanihan package that the aviation industry will be given its due share so that it can get back on their feet again. But the matter of providing assistance to aviation and airline is actually under the purview of another government agency. But again, we realize the very important role that our airlines play in both domestic tourism and international tourism. And certainly we would like them to be able to mount more flights, to increase their load factors and start servicing the different destinations.
And do you expect them to actually mount more flights, at least in the near term here, despite, of course, the resurgence of cases here, especially in Metro Manila?
Well, the decision to mount more flights to and from international points will depend to a large extent on the decision of authorities to open up our borders to international tourists. But as you very well know at the moment, the entry of foreign nationals is still limited. And with this new development of COVID cases rising, there is already a decision to lower the cap in our gateways. So as a matter of strategy, we really have to focus on domestic tourism. We feel that in the next several months, it will be the movement of Filipinos that will keep, of course, our domestic carriers afloat and also help the different enterprises across the country with the revenue stream. And when I talk about tourism enterprises, I'm talking about accommodation establishments, the hotels, the resorts, of course, the land transport facilities, tour operations, F&B operations, restaurants. So certainly we would like to at least move closer to the figures that we recorded 2 or 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Now, one only has to look at social media to actually realize it. You have a lot of content showing that the number of Filipinos are already at least more open to travel. Has the sector seen a recovery over the past few months, and do you see that recovery hitting a speed bump with cases resurging?
Well, the appetite for travel among Filipinos is still very strong. We had a survey conducted in May last year and another survey in December also of last year. And for both studies, one of the key questions that we asked was whether or not they will still travel given the current situation. And the encouraging thing is that a great majority of Filipinos will still travel. Of course, the type of travel experience will change. There will be greater preference for open air activities, going to the beach, going on road trips, going to the mountains, biking, hiking. So we see this as a positive development. And the same studies show that Filipinos are actually willing to comply with the minimum public health and safety protocols in terms of wearing of face masks, face shields, watching their distance, etc. So I think moving forward, what is important is that we maintain this discipline that we have been accustomed to over the last 12 months to make sure that we can contribute to containing the situation. So I think that in terms of strategy, what's going to be very important in the next several months is the willingness of the different destinations to open up, and also to make sure that the requirements and protocols are made as simple as possible.
Okay, so do I take it to mean as well, Yusek Bengzon, that despite the surge, there are still plans to reopen more sites?
It will be a calibrated move on the part of the LGUs. Of course, this will require a balancing act. On one hand, we want to make sure that the health and safety protocols are complied with, but on the other hand, we also realize that many of the enterprises have suffered enormously over the last 12 months and would need that revenue stream. And we also recognize the fact that many of our workers have been displaced or underemployed. And again, this is another challenge that we will have to address moving forward. Again, the key here is to maintain the optimum and delicate balance between economic and tourism activities on one hand, and on the other hand, making sure that we follow health and safety protocols.
Now, talking about following health protocols, Yusek Bengzon, are there now at least plans to come up with a uniform set of travel requirements here, especially if there's been much confusion with some destinations not really requiring RT-PCR tests? Is this something that the DOT is looking into?
Well, the IATF already issued Resolution 101, which basically streamlines the requirements for the different destinations that have opened up. So we have done away with the travel authority that we used to secure from police authorities. We've also done away with the health certificate. So right now, the only fundamental requirement is actually a negative RT-PCR test result, but only if the LGU requires it. So we don't have the quarantine requirements anymore, as we saw in some other destinations, unless, of course, you're exhibiting some symptoms. So the idea behind it is really to simplify the requirements and the protocols, and also to lower the cost of the RT-PCR. And just to let you know, we have a partnership with the Philippine General Hospital, wherein we 50% of the cost of RT-PCR. So this brings down the cost to about 900 pesos. So again, these are some of the measures that Secretary Puyat has really instructed us to work on to encourage domestic travel in the coming months.
But Yusek Bengzon, given the current scenario, isn't it more prudent, at least for the tourism department, to at least look into the possibility of making it a uniform requirement for all destinations to require RT-PCR tests?
That will be a decision that will be made by the local government units. I think many of the destinations and, of course, the relevant health authorities are leaning towards that. As we see an increase in COVID cases, we also expect more destinations to require it. But again, what is important here is that we continue with the economic activities, because we are also mindful of the importance of restoring livelihood, especially at the community level.
All right. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon, Tourism Undersecretary Benito Bengzon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jes.
Now, here are other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. The Agriculture Department has recommended to Malacanang the declaration of a state of emergency due to the African swine fever. DA Secretary William Dar said the recommendation was made yesterday. An official declaration of a state of emergency would allow the DA and local government units to implement biosecurity measures as well as rehabilitation programs such as hog repopulation. Now, under the DA's recommendation, a 1 billion peso contingency fund is earmarked for the initial implementation of the order. To date, ASF has spread to about 40 provinces across the country. IHS Markit sees Philippine economy growing 7.4% this year on the back of COVID-19 vaccinations starting in the country. This falls on the upper end of the government's 6.5 to 7.5% growth target for the year. The Philippine Star reports that the research firm sees the Philippines as still among the fastest growing economies in Asia, despite coming from a low base due to contraction last year. IHS market economist Shriya Patel says firms are just waiting for further easing of restrictions before jump-starting operations, particularly those in the tourism sector. London-based think tank Economist Intelligence Unit, however, is keeping a modest outlook, saying herd immunity vaccinations in developing countries like the Philippines could take more than 5 years to complete. The Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry is pushing for the direct procurement of vaccines for the private sector, saying it would aid the government to fast-track its inoculation program. Speaking to One News earlier, PCCI Honorary Chairman Sergio Ortiz Luis says the government is at a disadvantage in terms of making advance payments for the vaccines. He says allowing the private sector to purchase directly from manufacturers could help the country secure more vaccine supply and even allow for more room to choose brands.
At the tail end of the orders. So we were thinking that if the private sector can freely import, no, and it's made easy for them, they can easily negotiate with their counterparts. Anything that the private sector orders, and even the LGUs, are savings for the government.
Malacanang remains firm that private companies cannot directly purchase vaccines from manufacturers if not done under a tripartite agreement. The palace maintains that no vaccine has been authorized for commercial use. And those are the biggest news this trading day, March 18, 2021. Catch Businessworld live again tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. for the market to open and 3:15 p.m. for the market close. I'm Jes Delos Santos. We are One News. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines.